You're listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Josh Hacko from NH Micro, and this week we have Dylan on the show. Welcome, Dylan.
Hey. Thanks, Josh, for stepping in part one of this episode. I really appreciate it.
How does it feel to be on the other side of the seat?
Truly bizarre. Hearing my intro read by you, even after we talked about it, very weird, but also great. So I appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Dylan, and thank you for asking me to help out. But for the listeners, this is Dylan's 200th episode of his podcast. And massive, I mean, you guys should all be cheering in your cars and while you're working. Give him a round of applause. Well done. 200 of the biggest machining podcast in the internet. So thank you from all of us and well done.
My pleasure. And the biggest, I don't know about that, makes me incredibly uncomfortable to think about that, but I do appreciate it for sure. Well, so we've got a bunch of questions from the Patreon listeners. Thank you for co-hosting. I wanted someone who A, does this all the time, and B, we talk all the time. And so I thought that it would be a great back and forth.
Absolutely. Well, we can dive into some of the questions. Amazing questions, and a lot of them. And maybe we can start with Spencer Webb. And he's brought in a question and said, how has your interviewing skill and experience helped you in your machining profession? Given your immaculate taste in tools, how is it that you stay so flat?
Well, to get the second part out of the way first, of course, I use PFG stones. Actually, it's weird. It's one of those things that up until a few years ago, I had never heard of. And now I couldn't imagine doing my job without some sort of precision stones. It's bizarre. Like how so weird to me that was so absent in all of my training. And now it's like ubiquitous. Like I touch a PFG stone 10 times a day. And it's like, jaws. Oh, I got to stone my soft jaws because I see that I cut into them a little bit or something. And it's like, yeah. As far as interviewing skill and experience, that's very nice to say. I sometimes don't feel like I have any skill. I don't know if Spencer listens back to his episodes before he posts them, but I do. And 200 episodes in, and I'm still not 100% used to hearing my voice that much. And half the time, I think I've talked about it in past episodes, it's just terrible hearing yourself that much and then wondering, why do people actually listen to me? I don't know if you get that in your editing.
Absolutely. It's listening to yourself is like it's the sixth hell in Dante's Inferno. It's the last thing I want to do. But from my end, it's great. Like you have a really calming presence. The types of questions and the format and how you approach your guests, it's all extremely professional and very easy to listen to. It's always that fine line between like being overt and being sort of conversational, and you straddle that line really well. So, I mean, I don't want this to be like some sort of pity party fest or not.
No, not at all. Please, no. I couldn't take it. But to answer the question more directly, I think that everyone likes to talk about themselves. And because I talk to so many machinists and so many people in industry, it makes it very easy to become friends or become acquaintances with all these people. I go to the Easy Tech Council, has a lot of mixers and things. And getting people to open up about their business is really easy if you know the right questions to ask. But so many of us are just nerds at the end of the day that like to nerd out on our own business. And so knowing how to poke those points of, tell me about this, how did you get to this? Like, where did that come from? And people love to talk about that stuff. And I do too. I mean, I am in no way immune to that at all.
We have another question coming in from Cosmos. He asks, how do you prep for a show? And how do you come up with your questions? Your questions are really good. Do you have a minor in journalism or some interest in that area prior to manufacturing? What made you get into podcasting?
I have no minor in journalism. I've always been interested in media. Like I watch a lot of interviews with big YouTubers or people on social media. There's some great people out there that do that. Colin and Samir, I think I've sent you a couple of their interviews. They do a fantastic job of interviewing people. And I've always really been interested in that back and forth and great interviewers. Like I love Hot Ones. I think Sean Evans is one of the best interviewers out there. So I watch a lot of interviews because I love stealing questions. Like I love learning how to ask questions that are interesting to people and aren't just like, well, what's your favorite color? Like, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of helped. I got into podcasting because Peyton reached out and wanted to start a podcast. And at the time I was listening to The Bomb all the time. There wasn't really anything else out there. And it sounded like fun. And we would, you know, when he decided to leave the show, I was still having too much fun. I still am having too much fun to stop. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I was going to figure out a way to keep it going.
Yeah, I see these legendary internet sort of question askers, these interviewers that manage amazing interviews from in their like classic shows, but also spot interviews. And Sean Evans 100% comes into mind. And then there's like people like Nardwar who interview musicians. He interviews like the most disparate people, but is able to connect and create incredible content. And within machining, you're my Nardwar and Sean Evans. Like it's really, it shows that you're interested and having fun. And it's very, very easy to listen to.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. As far as how do I come up with my questions, a lot of the questions I just piggyback on the audience's excellent questions. Somebody will ask something and it'll just trigger a thought in my head of like, oh, that's adjacent to this. I'm curious about this, or I've seen this on your Instagram. So I wouldn't say that a lot of it is out of thin air. I come up with a great question, but someone might, you know, chime in on Instagram or in the Patreon and jog something in my head that's like, oh, this is something else we need to talk about. This is adjacent to this. And as far as prep, I mean, Josh and I are both looking at the show outline that I make every week. It, you know, has just a really, really rough outline. It's like, you know, big titles in color that are like intro, questions for guests, shop news and new things. And it's just to remind me the general flow of the show. I try to tell everyone that comes on, it's just a casual conversation. There is no script. At some point, somebody had asked me why I don't do pre-interviews. And I think a lot of it is that I much rather have the joy of discovery live on the show than just be rehashing stories we've already told each other.
Yeah, it comes out the first time usually a lot more natural. And the idea of getting into the audience to interview or to help jog interview questions, did that come from the start of the podcast, or was that something that slowly crept in? Was that gradual?
I think that was from the first guest interview we did. And really it was just people want to hear their name in a podcast, and like they want, like, creates instant buy-in. Like I know I've done it on podcasts, you know, you submit a question or something and you hope, or you're on a live stream and you type in a, you know, comment really quickly and somebody's like, oh, Dylan from Tucson said this. And you're like, oh man, that's super cool. Like, you know, I never thought that they'd say my name. So I think immediately I knew that would just be a fun thing for my audience and me to have that back and forth of, and I start knowing people through their names. You know, I see your name pop up over and over and I'm like, oh man, they ask really good questions. Like they're paying attention and they know these people too. And they want to know these things. And so it's great. And I think it really helps build the community around the podcast. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're not on the Patreon, jump on because you get priority. All these questions are coming from the Patreon. So another question from the Patreon is from Ethan. And he asks, whose backstory has inspired you the most? If you could go back to episode 1 or at any point in the podcast history, would you do anything differently? Why or why not? So 2-part question, the inspiration and then possible change. The backstory one, I might have to circle back to because much like favorite episodes or things like that, at 200 now, I mean, that's got to be probably 120 guests, 110 guests. There are so many things from everybody's story that I really appreciate, and it's hard to really nail down one that is, the most inspiring or anything like that. Like even Ethan, I mean, he's been on the show, and like hearing someone his age that's just like absolutely killing it. I mean, that definitely lights a fire under my ass. It's like, I mean, he's 10 years younger than me, and he's absolutely killing it on 5-axis Akumas. And I'm sitting here hoping for my first 5-axis. And so it definitely lights a fire under my ass. But as far as the most inspiring, I'll circle back to that one for sure. But if I could go back, I don't think that anything I would do differently would be big for the audience. It's like little things that I've done. Like I used to send out USB headsets that people wouldn't return to anybody in the States that was on the show once I got the Patreon going. And those created a bunch of feedback or like slight delay echoes. And, I ended up having to buy nicer software to get rid of them. And even then I noticed them in some episodes where it was just obvious to me. And the second I went to nicer USB mics and a return label, problem went away. I think it has something to do with the audio going both ways on one USB cable somehow freaks it out or something. But again, it's a little thing that probably a large majority of people never noticed or noticed and didn't care enough about to stop listening.
And in terms of Patreon support, what do you find most supportive? Is it the money or is it the interaction, the community from the Patreon?
Probably a little bit of both. Like the money is super nice because I know that if I ever need to like pick up another piece of software or a mic or something, it's probably covered. Like I just had to get I got another software recently that does automatic AI-based EQ and transcription and all of that because I saw it on MKBHD, their studio channel, and their sound guy was using it. I was struggling with a little bit of EQ stuff in one of the softwares I was using, and it worked great. And it was one of those subscription things. It was, a couple $100 for the year. I was like, Patreon pays so that the show gets better. And I use that money almost entirely. Better gear. I'm going to upgrade my microphone interface soon because I think it's not as good as it could be. I think that could be better. I'm always trying to experiment with new stuff so that the quality is as good as it can get, at least without having a real podcast editor doing this.
I love to hear that. And I think everyone on the Patreon loves to hear that as well, that it's actually all the money that's getting funneled into this is improving the quality of the podcast and allowing you to make quality-based decisions for the podcast. Yeah, amazing. So good. We've got another question that comes from Contrast4D Con. He says, what is the end goal? Is there an end goal?
So I'm not sure what he's talking about, if it's podcast or business. Podcast end goal, just keep doing this as long as I can. Like I would love to add more to this. I said on the podcast maybe a handful of episodes ago that I bought a camera. I'd love to start doing some more digital media. I have some scripts written, just have to find the time to shoot them at this point. And yeah, just keep adding value as much as I can. I've experimented. Like I did a few live streams for the Patreon. I did a few Patreon exclusive podcasts that were like 15 minutes. I haven't found anything that stuck. And I think that like I'm just going to keep experimenting with things until the audience says like, hey, yeah, we like that. Let's do more of that. And I'll keep doing that. But I don't know. End goal for that, is just let's keep this show rolling as long as I can. And then as far as business, I mean, I think I've said it on the podcast before. Brad and I, the business is a means to an end. Like we want to grow this to the point that we can sell it while it's still big and we're not old. It's not going to be my last business. I will always have, quote unquote, the entrepreneurial spirit. But, I think that business is a means to have money, which is freedom, like to do whatever. Like I would love to have a Speedio or a Kern in my garage and come up with an idea of something to make at 12 o'clock and go and make it and not have anything in between me and making cool stuff. So yeah, it's just a means to an end.
On that business note, Jeff Machines asks, what made you decide to start your own shop? I'm sure it's somewhere in the past episodes, but can't recall you saying it. Give us a refresher.
Okay, so this harkens back to when Brad and I met in school, and we both were working at shops that we didn't feel like we're serving their customers well. He worked in a production shop that had a lot of issues as far as management of the shop and management of resources. I worked in a prototype shop that didn't invest a lot in tooling, and we had a lot of old machinery, and we were not investing in new processes. And we both just felt like, this isn't that hard. Like, talk to your customers, tell them what you're doing, tell them when you're going to be late, buy good tools so that you don't have to fight bad tools. At the time, and obviously this is a super naive 20-year-old thought that we're both just like, well, of course we can do it better than the people who have been around for 20 years in this industry. But that was the start of it. You know, we were young and had a lot of time and figured, let's buy a machine and try this out. And, you know, it's rolled its way 8 years now till here.
Yeah, amazing. And are there any points in that journey that were inflection points, things that you look back on and you say, well, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I'm at today?
Ooh, that's a really good question. There have been certain customers that we've picked up that have been inflection points, especially Brad and I talked about this recently. Like, we picked up a customer early on in the shop that had basically a blanket plus or minus 2 thou tolerance on everything. And up to that point, we had worked in shops that like plus or minus 5 was the normal and plus or minus 10 was pretty often too. And so at first we were terrified. You know, we had our old Kitamura. We were like, can we do this? Like, are we going to screw ourselves? This is a big customer. And we worked at it and slowly got more and more okay with it and bought nicer machinery and the brothers and stuff. And now, you know, plus or minus 2 is like, oh yeah, that's easy. Whatever. That's normal. We get stuff sometimes and we're like, oh, plus or minus 5. Like, do I even need to check the part? Like, this is easy now, you know? And so I think that not only was that a big capital boost from having a big customer that was sending us a lot of work, but it was a inflection point where it really pushed us as machinists. And I think that we've just gotten so much better because of things like that. And we've had customers since then do that, where they've sent us work. It's like right on the edge of our comfort zone. And I think I've talked about it on the show. I kind of have like a 3-to-1 rule that I try to stick to. So like, I'll do 3 jobs that are cakewalk and I know I can just get them out. And then I'll try to pick up 1 job that slightly pushes my boundaries somewhere, whether that's business wise, whether that's, you know, assembly wise, whether that's tolerance or learning a new tool, buying a boring head, something along those lines that I have to learn, I have to push, because otherwise I'm just going to get bored. Like, even if I'm just making cakewalk prototype parts, that's eventually going to get boring to me.
Yeah. And in terms of your business process, so like you talked about onboarding this customer and how that pushed you, but in terms of how your business runs, so everything basically but the machining itself, has there been an inflection point there too?
I think the most recent one was going to paperless parts, having any kind of, really, I don't even know if the quoting software was as important as having just a running list of jobs that Brad and I can look at with all of the drawings and prints and models and everything, basically a repository that listed our priorities. And something that easy was a big enough change that, you know, before I was interacting with most of the customers. And so Brad would have to come to me and say, what is even due in the shop? Like, what are we working on? You know, I've heard you talk about, you quoted this and this and this, but like, what do we have on the board? What can I work on? And then we got paperless and he's just like, looks and he goes, all right, this is the next one. Cool. I'll knock it out. And that's, I mean, how a business kind of needs to work. So,
Yes. Yeah.
But besides that, I think that a lot of it was just very slow change of like learning how to manage customers, learning how to quote quickly, because before paperless, it was really, I had this quoting spreadsheet that a coworker gave me probably right at the beginning of the company. Like he didn't even know he was giving it to me for the company. He just was talking about it one day and I said, oh, can I have a copy of that? I'm just interested to see what it is. And we used that for 6.5 years.
Wow.
And there's still a lot of black magic involved in that spreadsheet, because it would spit out a number and then it would be up to me to go, yeah, but really that's 2x this because of this and this and this, or because of the opportunity cost, or because I know that this customer is going to change something at the last minute. And so, having that spreadsheet, I guess, was another inflection point. Up until that point, we had no framework. We had never quoted a part ever. And it was, our first customer was a friend of Brad, that they did stamping, and we put tight tolerance features in their stamped aluminum parts. And they would just tell us what the price was. It was like, hey, we got 30 of these plates and they're $30 a piece. Do you want them or not? And I was like, okay, sure. Like, we have nothing else to do. Sure. Like, and those jobs sucked. Like there was, because we would be putting like 2 features in. And so there would be 30 440 screws to hold this part down to their fixture that they would loan us. And then, so it would take longer to load it and unload it than it would to run this part. And you're running stacks of plates and it's just mind numbing. And yeah, it was a nightmare. I think that actually we learned a lot of good lessons there though, too, of, kind of sticking up for yourself, because we started getting fixtures from them and then started noticing, well, these fixtures are terrible. Like they're trying to have us hold, plus or minus 2 thou on a depth, but the whole thing is out of parallel by 5 thou.
Yeah.
And so I remember having to go there and argue with one of their machinists in front of their manager and show him that the way he was checking flatness and parallelism was wrong, and, clue them in. And from then on, we were just like, we're quoting fixtures now too. All of your jobs are now including in fixtures, and there's going to be a fixture line on them. And so a lot of little things like that kind of grow your confidence as a business, I think.
Speaking of confidence as a business, IGS Dan asks, would you and Brad ever consider selling protein machining? What does success for your business look like?
Yeah. So as I said, we will totally sell it. That's the goal. That's the plan. I will always be a machinist. I don't need protein machining to be a machinist and to have fun in machining. This is a means to an end. Businesses, I think, are made to make profit. Like that is, if you've followed along the book series, that is the goal, to make profit. So it seems only natural to sell the business. And success, I think, is growing it to the point where short-term success, I think, for us is growing it to the point where it is automated, to where our employees and us have a good work-life balance and produce far more parts than we technically should with the low numbers of employees we have. And then long-term success is selling that business. And so, yeah, we'll see where it goes.
So you talked about paperless parts and you talked about your quoting spreadsheet as things that help in this automation process. More on the machining side, so in machine selection, but also tooling and all the things that are associated with it. What do you think are the key things that help along that journey of sort of self-sufficiency and automation?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean,
we fix all your problems.
Exactly. I think the more people I interview who do automation, the more deep, dark pit holes there are that you can fall into by accident. And I mean, even you now having a machine with integrated automation, there are still issues that pop up that you don't think about. And so like I don't know. I think we're just taking a gamble. Like we're betting that Hermless system is going to be long-term what we want, that the HS Flex is going to be long-term what I think is going to be the easiest for us. From everybody I've talked to, integrated solutions are heaps better than, trying to tack on stuff on the outside of the machine. Pallet loading, I think, is at least in the short term far superior for job shopping than part loading. And so, but at the end of the day, like we haven't done it. So it's just a gamble. Like this is, we're going to buy the Hermla first, most likely. Like that's, I don't know, 98% our next machine, probably. Like that's as sure as I can be without having a new space to move into. or, placed a PO. But I think that that's where we're going to go, and we're going to try to automate that. So my short-term vision for it is to buy like a 4-sided tombstone and be able to automate that overnight. And just like, okay, I've got a few stainless parts. They run for 45 minutes a piece. Let me run 4 sides of a tombstone and leave for all 4 hours of it. And if I can make it through those 4 hours, cool. Then next time I load up, a double station vices on all 4 sides, and then I make it through 6 hours or 8 hours or something. And so I think that if we can get a workflow as far as tool breakage and just speeds and feeds on stuff like that, that will last that many parts, when we do finally jump in with both feet and buy a real automation system for it, and extra tool capacity, hopefully we'll be a little further ahead, because from everything I've seen, if you buy that kind of money's worth of automation, you have to be ready to go ASAP. It's not something you can dilly-dally around and hope that, in 6 months, maybe I'll have parts running. It's like, you should probably have parts running in a week if you can do it. So,
that is the most challenging thing, I think, about automation outside of like the technical challenges, is the business case for it. They're such high value items, those complex automation systems, that if they're not being utilized, obviously they're not being paid off. And that's fine if your automation system is like low 5 figures. But if your automation system is like mid 6 figures, suddenly it's a lot more pressure to get things running. And it's like the chicken and the egg, right? You should have the work there the day before you install the system, but sometimes you need the system to attract the work that is going to come as well.
Exactly.
I mean, I see all these things as like large scale infrastructure projects. It's often very helpful to look at a project like that in the context of what would a Microsoft or Amazon or a very large medical company, how would they approach this problem? Well, they'd probably have multiple engineers doing procurement, then multiple engineers looking at like how they're going to plan work going in and out of the machine. And meanwhile, it's just like a small business taking on a very large project, and you feel all this pressure, but there's almost comfort in knowing that these kinds of projects take very large companies lots of resources, both in time and money, to execute on. The other thing with automation is that it's obviously very easy to make a lot of scrap. I think that's like that one sort of thing that's hanging above everyone's head. It's like, well, yeah, I can automate scrap making. That's the easiest thing to automate. But qualification of the process, I don't know how standardized qualification, because every single process, every single part has like this little weird intricacy. Like, you make this part outside of stainless tool life. Yeah, okay, you understand stainless tool life, but it's got one bore that's plus or minus 10 microns. Well, suddenly your whole process has to change based around that one feature. And then that's just an example, right? There might be other features or parts that demand, maybe it's not even a tight tolerance. Maybe it's just like chatter or surface finish or something like that. But it's like a unique case-by-case basis. And I see small companies actually have a benefit with that because they're a little bit more agile. Like if it's you running your automation cell, you have a really, really tight feedback loop as to what's working and not working. But if you're, integrated into like 20 machines and you have to keep them all running, like might actually end up just making really bad parts before you even pick up, before QC even finds out that 10 micron bore is actually like 50 microns oversize. Anyway, my 2 cents on that. But
So to take a little detour, I do want to get a little update on your kern, because last time you were just starting to use it a little more. We've talked since then. You've been running like main plates overnight. How is, I think, main plates? Am I wrong there?
Some not main plates, but yeah, watch parts. Yeah.
How's it been going?
Oh man, it's overall very, very positive, extremely positive. Does feed into a little bit of what I just mentioned, and like every part is different, and how do you qualify some parts? How do you qualify the process? Like it's very easy or tempting. It's very tempting to just scale a process because it worked once. And you're like, oh yeah, it'll work like 4 or 5 times through the night or during the day. And that's probably where we're still at, where running more and more unattended during the day to see how reliable our processes can be during the night. And for the watch part specifically. So we're like on the watch face, there's indices and numerals that are separate to the actual base of the dial. They get put onto the dial and then sort of fastened by laser welding from the backside. And there's a few like tricky things to gauge. The first is like the pin diameters. It's a 0.2 millimeter pin, and there's probably about, well, we're trying to keep plus or minus 5 microns on the pin diameter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not super easy. But then like burr formation actually overrides all of that. You can hit the diameter, but if you're burred up, no bueno. And then you sort of think, okay, I'll just chamfer everything. But if your chamfer is off by about 10 microns in Z, it suddenly produces a shape that's too big and too like aesthetically wrong, which is crazy to think about.
Geez.
So qualification for that is really human based. And so if we can start something sort of at the start of the day and by the end it's finished machining and you have a final QC check, both on your dimensions but also on your sort of aesthetic properties, then we have this sort of feedback loop. But it takes a whole day sometimes to machine a pallet of these parts. There's that, and there's like tool life, which is another sort of funky little thing. In the micro world, tools can still cut, but the cutting force can be really, really high relative to the size of the tool. So you get more deflection, and then you get sort of smearing and weird feature generation, and all those things you can't qualify in a single run. Might only pick up on the 4th or 5th pallet that one tool is dull, and it can be adversely affecting so many other parts of that same process. So we don't run anything overnight just yet, and it might be a little while before it gets to that stage. But unattended during the day is still a huge win.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, especially, for anybody listening, if you're in Australia, they are hiring. Go get the coolest job ever. But I'm sure that helps, having that machine run all day without intervention for the most part, at least takes the sting out of not having enough people a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely helps with that and frees up the human resource to be able to start planning the next thing or work on another project. And yeah, it's I think automation is actually an incredibly difficult challenge. People say that it's challenging, but how many people talk about why? And the more, like, basically you have to find out why yourself a lot of the time. And it's no amount of people telling you, oh, it's hard, ever like clicks in until you start trying to get reliability. And you could talk about automating, a really complex part, and it's obviously hard. Or you could talk about automating a relatively simple part, but in high volumes or in high throughput or in low cycle times. And that's hard too. So there's different facets of hard. So yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously if you're in Australia, hit me up. We're looking for more people and growing the team. Thank you, Dylan, for saying that.
Of course, man. If I was living there, I would be knocking on your door immediately. I mean, I think it's just such a killer opportunity that I can't believe you don't have more people applying. It seems insane.
Well, yeah, thank you for the kind words. That's very nice. We've got more questions though.
Yes.
Let's power through. I've got a question that I wrote down. I said, peek behind the curtain. Has the podcast opened doors for you, quantifiable or non-tangible?
Yes, to both. We have gotten work from it. Only in very, very recent years have we gotten work from it. Someone asked me, should I start a podcast to get to get work for my business? And I was like, definitely not, unless you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah,
it took 3 years for me to see gross benefits from it. And I think you really have to be doing it too from a place of not wanting those things. I think if from day one I had been really hard selling Proteum, like every episode having a sponsored by Proteum segment, I don't think any of you would be listening, or very few of you would still be listening. I don't think that is honest, and I don't think that is what has actually given me business. People who have reached out because of the podcast do because they listen, because they enjoy it, not because, oh man, well, you sold Proteum so hard that you must be that good. It was never about that. And I think as non-tangible benefits, I've talked a lot on the show about you have to reach out to other machinists. Like, this trade is so isolating and it's so niche that you have to find friends. If they're not in your local community, you have to find them out and about. And I have this Rolodex now of friends and acquaintances and people I can turn to. Like, if I run across a reel of some cool watch or something, who do you think I send it to? You think I send it to my friends locally? No, I send it to Josh. Like, I'm like, dude, is this cool or not? Like, have you looked at this before? So I've just met so many people. It's fantastic. There's so many people I can reach out to and just ping ideas off of, or like, if I had Skyhook questions, it's like Amish would be the one I'd talk to, because he's talked about it so much or shown it so much with his DMG. And it's like, I have so many people to turn to now for questions, and I can just build this network of people that can ask me questions and vice versa. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And the massive unexpected benefit of getting into this trade. When I started doing this, I never thought that I'd have mates across the world who I could talk to at any hour, literally any hour. There's guys in Europe that wake up at some time, and I know Marvin's schedule and when he wakes up and goes to sleep. I know Adam gets up super early, so that there's like an overlap. So there's not a moment in the day where you can't just flick a message to someone. And who would have thought? Like, machining is that dirty, oily thing, right? That like gets looked over in trade schools, and but it's actually not quite true.
No, not at all. It's actually funny you say that, because I have 2 world clocks on my phone on my second screen, and one is Sydney time, because we talk enough that I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to bug him like 2 a.m. And then one is Berlin, so that Travis and I can talk. But it's always like, I'll scroll over one and be like, oh yeah, it's like 6 a.m. Josh is probably up. I can shoot him a message. So yeah, it's fantastic having really worldwide friends and reach because of this.
It does speak to how isolating the trade could be as well. I think that's something that like the Discord helps with. Obviously, what we've just been talking about in terms of like podcasting and Insta machinists, and then like LinkedIn as well. All these social media platforms, they definitely help in reducing the real isolation of being in a shop by yourself all day, or seeing one person or 2 people, or being in a team that's just pretty static. I know, like, from a mental health standpoint, 100% being able to just vent. Like, my wife is lovely, fantastic, beautiful, but she doesn't know what breaking a $200 tool feels like, or even worse, $1 million tool. She doesn't know what that feels like, and it's like no therapist would either, and only people within your industry, and sometimes people close to your age. Only they truly know what it feels like, and having that support network, I think, is just so valuable. And
so if you're listening and you don't have that, please go find it. Whether it's reaching out to me or reaching out to anybody online, find a network of people you can chat with or something. Like, I just reconnected with this guy Scott in town. He owns a great machine shop. He worked at my last job just before I arrived there. Like, we've just missed each other throughout the years, and he runs a shop with his business partner, and we're very close in age. And like, we just went out and had a couple of beers last night, and just having someone local that I can sit down and have a couple of beers with, and we can lament about, engineers sending us impossible to machine models, or, customers not paying on time, little things that you just want to bitch about sometimes, is so helpful. It's just so much fun. At the end of the night, I was like super jazzed up to go back to the shop the next day. So incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it's so funny. After, I think the last time I was on, I mentioned croissants And I was like, oh yeah, that's my latest sort of binge. I love finding a good croissant. And then a friend who I'd known this guy, James, for a little while. He reaches out and he's like, oh, you know what? You want to grab a croissant together and just chat? And that's been like a regular thing, monthly thing since that episode. And we've, bonded, and he owns a machine shop down the road and literally down the road. And we formed something because of this podcast.
That's amazing.
Nuts.
Those are the stories that make this like so gratifying. Like, I love the work that I've gotten from it. Sure, great. But like, that's the stuff that like, I can't wait to keep the show going because of that. Like, people reach out all the time. They're like, oh, I found a job because you had so-and-so on the show. Or like, I found this tool that like saved this job for me because of something you said on the show. And like, that's the stuff that like, oh man, that hits me close to home,
Brilliant. Semi-related. I've got another question written down here. How do you find your next guest?
Honestly, most of it's through Instagram. Like and it's usually people I've followed for a while that I'll ask on. Sometimes somebody will recommend someone and say, hey, go check out his page. He does cool stuff. I'm not really against a lot of stuff. We were talking beforehand. The only thing that I want to steer away from is like advertisement stuff. Like I think I really value the trust my audience has given me. And the last thing I want to do is put products on the show that I don't like the person behind them, or I don't trust them, or they have not been around enough. Like if I do bring on a new company, it's because I want to hear the story of a early company, not because I'm trying to tell you as an audience, go buy his stuff. And I really take that seriously because I think there's far too much advertising and machining that is disingenuous. And it was funny. Easton and I were talking this week about how owning a business and being a machine shop owner kind of makes you an asshole sometimes. Like you get to the point where there's so many distributors, knocking on your door and trying to sell you the next best thing. And like I went from this person who wanted to give everyone a slice of my time to don't talk to me ever again and don't ever come back here because I don't like you. Like I hate doing that. And so the last thing I want to do is make my show anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, if I heard on any podcast, but like on something that I trust, like this podcast, if I heard sponsored by machining tool manufacturer A at the start, it'd just be an instant turnoff. And there is like a lot of veracity, I guess. No, it's not the right word, but like a lot of truth in you sticking to your guns and doing stuff that you actually like. A, because it's obvious that you like it and it's easy to listen to. But B, because machine tool companies or cutting tool manufacturers, they actually pay money for this stuff. They do want advertisement in the 21st century, and they do want new forms of influencing marketing and purchasing decisions. And saying no to that and sort of standing your ground and making a media format that you enjoy yourself, there's honor in that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And again, not to plug the Patreon, but the Patreon is the reason I can do that too. Like, not the reason I can do that, but it helps me say no. It's like, no, I've already got a few hundred people sponsoring me every month, and I am much more grateful to that than I am to like, XYZ tooling company, like, oh, we'll give you $100 an episode to say that you use our end mills kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've got one more question here. You said that you'd loop back to it, and it's fine. It's fine that you won't say that the Josh Hacko episodes weren't the best episodes. It's fine. I'll concede. But you just can't say that the Adam Demuth episodes were the best ones either. Otherwise, I will be very upset. But is there something that stood out in the last, 200 episodes that really struck a chord?
So I ran a 5,000 follower giveaway, something like that, on LinkedIn to grow our LinkedIn and also to, just kind of give it back. And I was asking for favorite quotes, and actually John Rabinowitz, who runs the shop, he reminded me of one story that I really loved, and it was Josh Ogle. And the quote that he posted was, "The worst thing you can do is get everything you've dreamed of. Everything I wanted, I had, and I didn't know what the hell to do with it. I didn't know that I could just be happy with that and just keep going."
Wow.
And that reminded me like what a excellent, I guess, comeback story his story is, and just like how inspiring it is to just, you can just be happy. Like sometimes it's okay to just enjoy what you're doing and say like, okay, today's just a good day. There's nothing that I need to do besides just enjoy it. And so I went back through that list because I remembered seeing that quote and really liking it. And actually he was the one who won because of that quote. I saw it and I was like, yeah, that's got to win, because I really love the sentiment there.
Amazing.
And of course, all the Josh Hacko episodes. With that. But,
boo, 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 boo. Cut it out. Cut it out.
No, like I told you before we started, it's really hard to nail down any one episode. There are little bits that are so fantastic from so many of them. Like anytime I talk to Jeff Tiedekin, it's like, you want to learn how to run a shop on a shoestring budget out of your garage and still end up with Matsuras and stuff. Like, listen to his episodes because they're always so fun. And he has a way of just like, I will make it work. Like things will work out in my favor if I work hard and just keep my nose down. And it does, clearly.
But he's all talk when it comes to getting on the podcast. He always hypes himself up that he's going to be a 6-hour episode. And I'm sitting there, I'm waiting. Come on, Jeff, bring it on. But never once has he passed the threshold. And
we'll get there one day. I promise. One day we will get there. I'm trying to think of other episodes like, Jeff Hooper from Chipmunkies. Another great lesson of like, I don't need big machines. I don't need to make $1 million. I just want to make cool parts in my garage and be able to ride my motorcycle while the machine runs. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Like right on. That's not the right thing for everyone. And that's not everyone's goals. But like, I think it's a good aspiration to have of like, you can just be happy and like just make parts if you want to with a couple machines. Like that's totally fine.
Great answers. And you can see how humble you are and in taking that advice. That's really, it's deep. It's super, super deep.
I've always been someone who maybe has been criticized as not being happy in the present situation, like not stopping to smell the roses, to use a terrible cliche, but like I'm always like, okay, great, that's wonderful, I'm glad we accomplished that, on to the next goal. And I think that's kind of necessary to grow a business. But having people on the show that do remind me of like, dude, you got it good, like look back 5 years ago. And Brad and I try to have that kind of retrospection of like, man, 8 years ago we were working in shops we didn't want to be working in. We had an old Kitamura that was breaking down occasionally. We had just enough work to literally keep the lights on and pay our rent. And look where we are now. And look at all the tools we have and like how much easier our workflow is because we have invested in all this stuff. And so I do have to forcefully remind myself, you got it good, dude. Like let's take a beat, even on a terrible day. Yeah, you scrap that part, but like globally, we're doing well. This is a good day.
Yeah, that's been a recurring theme, I think. How do you remain in the present? How do you actually disassociate from all the worries and stuff that's happening in your head and like, I forgot to order that tool and a customer's going to be upset because it's late, or I don't have enough work. All these thoughts prevent you from, as a business owner, as a machinist, as someone in like a relatively high stress trade, they prevent you from being in that moment. And tips and ideas and methods of how to get into the moment and stay in the moment are always so welcome. I was talking with Phil, Steel Phil on Instagram. And yeah, like it seems it's a recurring narrative amongst sort of machinists in general. How do you, sometimes it's existential as well. Like you're wondering like, what are the parts that I'm making? I'm just pressing a green button all day, or like these things that are just going to go in. Like it's cool that they're going into space, but they just turn into space junk after a year. Like
that's a deep rabbit hole right there. Like, am I contributing to the future doom of the human race as we know it? Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe. We'll see, yeah. But I guess every single thing you do in life can be approached from that pessimistic attitude. And yeah, it's very refreshing to hear someone say, well, actually, let's try to stop. Let's try to think, and let's try to capture the good things and celebrate them.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I'm trying to find it. I don't know if you've ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
I've heard of the book. Yeah, I've never read it.
It took me 3 or 4 times to get through the book. Okay. It is a little weird, for sure. But I think that, like, especially as a machinist, if you can get in that flow state most often, that's where I find happiness the most. Is like, right. Whether that's I turn on some awesome song or something and I'm running 3 machines and I'm programming something and things are just going my way. But the quote, and I have it written down on my phone because I loved it so much. Hold on one second. Okay. The way to see what looks good and to be at one with this goodness as the work proceeds is to cultivate an inner quietness, a peace of mind so that goodness can shine through. I say inner peace of mind. It has no direct relationship to the external circumstances. It can occur to a monk in meditation, to a soldier in heavy combat, or to a machinist taking off that last 10,000ths of an inch. And I've always loved that. I do think that you get that flow state where time just disappears and you are just making parts and having fun. And the more time I can spend there, the happier I am overall.
You're listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by machinists. I'm your host, Chris Zappettini of Zappettini Consulting. And this week we have Dylan on the show. Welcome, Dylan.
Hey, Chris. How's it going?
You know, living the dream. You're privy to my financial issues. And I guess actually everybody is. So just the woes continue, but it'll be fine, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we were talking earlier today, I think you've cut a lot of dead weight out of the company and you just haven't seen ballast has not, come due yet. You have not been buoyant again.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if it ends up being that I finish this project sleeping in my car, then that's what it takes, you know?
Right.
But hey, we'll be fine. It'll
be an even better comeback story.
Yeah, that's all be like, hey, I was just like in the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah. Let's hope it doesn't make it to that.
Yeah.
But yes, anyway, it would still be a good story. Anyway.
200th episode, baby.
200. I know. Yeah. I spoke with Josh last night. It's very surreal to think. For some reason, I had it in my head that 200 episodes was not 4 years. And I was like, oh yeah, it has been 4 years of this. This is pretty cool. Yeah.
4 beautiful years.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a question that anybody asked, but like, I'm going to jump right into it and ask, like, when you started doing this, did you think you would have like the best machining podcast that they're manufacturing podcast that is kind of readily available?
First of all, very kind. I would never use that phrase to describe my podcast.
Well, that's because you're a humble guy. But I mean, I think pretty much anybody listening to this would probably agree that for not being like super niche, you know, like obviously Precision Microcast is like something that people consider very like they tout very highly because it's so awesome and it's also very elusive.
Oh yeah.
But like in terms of this show, it's just so eclectic, you know, and it brings in a lot of different perspectives. So in terms of like a amalgamation of CNC machining and just general manufacturing, I think that's what makes this one. Like, I mean, obviously it's my favorite. To be honest, it's the like only one that I listen to for the most part, other than like incremental.
Right. Well, very much appreciate that. I definitely never thought it would be where it is now. I always had wanted from day one. I was pushing guests from day one. Like even when it was Peyton and I wanted to have people on because I thought it was so valuable to have a platform where I could bring on subject matter experts. The beginning, I had kind of envisioned it more of like, oh, I'll bring on someone from Qualichem and we'll talk about coolant, and someone from OSG and we can talk about taps and
boring.
Well, and it's happened here and there. I've had Doug from Freza or Dave from Carbide Cutting Tools and stuff like that. But
those guys really are different animals, though.
Yeah,
because like Doug is like the CTO of Freza, and he's like programming and cutting with his stuff. Cool. So Dave from Carbide Cutting Tools, same thing. Like I haven't got a chance to use his stuff, but when I had an issue with a tool, right, and I think I said this on a previous episode, within the span of a week, he designed 2 different tools, tested them both, and shipped them to me. Like, you're not getting that from OSG or Qualichem. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. No, I think that I, along the way, discovered how much I love just meeting new people through this and like hearing. There's been so many guests that have come on where, I ask everyone, how did you get into this? And you think, a lot of the stories are the same. Like I loved Legos, I loved cars, I loved BMX bikes. And then there's the people who are like, oh yeah, I was in school for like music or something, somehow made my way into manufacturing. And that's the stuff where you're like, man, this really does like cross so many barriers at its core, or can, I guess, cross all these barriers at its core, which is just super cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it fundamentally comes down to like most of the people in this trade like to solve problems. And we just find like the most stressful way to solve a problem really is cutting metal.
Yeah. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted people at all. Well, yeah. We can jump into some of the questions. I think we had some great ones. I mean, and I think that was a great one too. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one more personal question before we jump into some of these other ones. And I kind of alluded to it before we started recording, but like and there's kind of a user question like this, but it's, if you were to go back and do it again, because you have talked about wanting to get into product development on here before, do you think that you would place more of an emphasis on product development when you were part-time versus starting a prototype shop when you were part-time?
I mean, similar to how,
question.
Similar to how we were talking earlier, I do agree with you. It is probably easier to do that part-time because there's not external due dates. And I think had you asked me maybe even 6 or 8 months ago, I would have said, yeah, I should have started with products. But now, especially after like our focus in like the pumpkin plan and stuff, I kind of let go of that whole like I want to make my own product stuff. Like that was a rotten pumpkin. Like I never got far enough down that route that I have anything that I'm really attached to. Like I have designs that, sure, one day if I sell the company and have a Speedio in my garage or something, and I'm just farting around and making stuff, I'll go back and revisit all these projects and make all of the fun stuff. But I gotta be like laser focused on what we're doing well, and that's prototyping at a high level, I think.
Nice. That's a beautiful answer. Makes me cry over here because that's not necessarily because that's not what I thought you were gonna say. So that was cool. Tight. Oh, this is one that I like. Why are you so handsome? And who has the coolest RX-7 you've ever ridden in?
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. And then, hey, you didn't answer the question.
I have no idea. Yeah, I guess I was just born this way.
There we go.
and then, Ryan definitely had the coolest RX-7s. A little story about that. Yeah. Ryan had a V8 swapped. Oh, man, he's going to kill me if I mess this up. I think it was an FC RX-7 that he V8 swapped and turboed, and that thing was truly terrifying. Like it, can't remember what he dynoed it at. I want to say it was close to 500 wheel horsepower, and it was just
those things weigh like nothing, right?
Yeah, it felt like a freight train just pulling. Like there was no lag in power and just going through the gears. It was just nothing but push you back in your seat the entire time, and truly was a frightening machine. And, you know, he drove it all the time and somehow didn't kill himself. It was awesome.
Where is it now? Did he get rid of it?
It met its end unfortunately, to I want to say it was like a drunk driver or something that hit it while it was parked. It was, just absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah. At least he wasn't in it and didn't get because in Arizona, it's very common for people to get on the freeway going the wrong way and murder somebody.
Yeah. As bad as it was to the car, I guess overall, like you said, you know, nobody was hurt besides, you know,
probably the drunk driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, probably not the drunk driver. Those guys never get hurt. They're always fine because they're fucking like noodles.
Yeah, unfortunately true. But it was by far, his has been the coolest RX-7 I've ever ridden in or been around. It was badass. It was really cool.
Nice. And then, so I guess like the real question, quote unquote, is what are the top 3 pieces of advice for somebody who wants to start with their own CNC machine or CNC shop? It's also a massive question.
Yeah, it is. And I think like advice I would give now is much more about the customer service and like mental well-being side of it than it would be a few years ago, where it'd be like, oh, you need this kind of tooling and you need this kind of machine. And like now it's much more focused for me on the business side of it than it is like machining.
Yeah, because making parts is the easy thing. You know, it's just kind of like the hilarious thing to think about. But I mean, if just because you can make a part doesn't mean you can run a shop, and doesn't mean you can do this, and doesn't mean you can do that. But like, it is so much less about being able to make parts and just being able to, like, you know, the evergreen tenet of just being able to communicate with people.
Yeah. So I guess my top 3, I told you one the other day over text. The first one would be never argue something that can be fixed with an apology.
I really like that one.
Yeah. What I mean by that is that if your customer comes to you mad about something, and all it takes for them to be happy is to say, you're sorry, even if it's not your fault, just apologize.
Yeah.
Get your ego out of it. Make your customer happy. It's fine.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like you have to, you know, fall on your sword and remake a bunch of parts if they screwed something up. But I'm saying that if they come to you and say, hey, I wish that this surface finish had been better, or hey, I wish that you had like deburred this, and you know in their print that it had said something like leave sharp. Don't argue it. Just say next time we'll make sure that that's better.
Yeah. And then you turn to your buddy next to you and then you start bitching. But you don't bitch to the
that's
customer.
when I call Chris and go, man, you got to hear this story.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, dude. Like not to derail you, but like we had the project that we're working on in Massachusetts, like they want us to finish, and we're getting close to actually finishing it, even though it's about to have a fucking birthday.
Ugh.
All of a sudden they're like, I think we want to add another robot to this system to do to blow off the parts or whatever. And it's like, the fuck are you guys talking about? Like, this doesn't even make sense. And they're like, oh, we can probably do it ourselves. And it's like, you say that, but then you asked us what it would take to do it. So I don't believe that you can do this yourself.
Oh no.
But we got them off of that for the most part, but it was just like such a weird thing. Cause I'm like, I mean, obviously I'm like, dude, this is a crazy customer story right now, just out of nowhere. Like, yeah, we just want to add a robot.
Yeah,
no bigs.
But we'll do it ourselves. And we won't screw up your stuff. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Anyway, all right.
Second tip. Your parts are most likely not the only parts your buyer or customer is dealing with.
Yep.
What seems like the end of the world to you is just a small roadblock in their project. And you need to learn that and act as such. So like, rather than literally staying up all night to run a part because you're so worried about it, and then you end up being late anyway, and you tell your customer and they go, oh yeah, that's no biggie. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Like that happens that happens so much more than your customer freaking out because you're a day or two late.
Yeah. So number 1, underlying message, communicate. Number 2, underlying message, communicate.
I told you, most of this is going to be business stuff.
It is so business stuff but it is like, the amount of times where people, like, there's a question, like, this feature doesn't seem like they, like, do they need this to be this way? Like, it doesn't seem like it would. Instead of trying to beat your head against the wall to like try and make it happen, and like spending all night trying to do this thing where it's like, oh, I can't get this. I like, a good example I can think of is trying to hold like an 8th true position to cast datums or something. And we were like beating our head against the wall, whatever, didn't want to talk to the customer. And then we eventually got the engineer in, and they were like, oh, we just want it to be concentric to the casting. That's why it's so tight. And it's like, that's easy. Like, why did you dimension it this way? And he's like, a junior engineer, like, just over GD&T'd, which, I mean, that's a thing we see more and more from like kids out of school, pretty much, is it's like, well, this has to be a 2,000 true position over like a meter. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Because it has to be. Like,
yeah, because
okay.
I want it to be. It's like,
Yeah.
well, have you done any analysis? No, that just feels right to me.
Yeah. If you do it like this, then I don't have to worry about it later. If all my parts are perfect, then they just go together really well. Like, oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, crazy how that works. Okay.
Yeah. Number three.
Number 3, and this is really more of a personal philosophy, but I think that it's something that you should at least consider if you're starting a shop or running a shop, and that is prioritize quality over due date every time. If you have to make a choice, people will forgive you being late 90% of the time. They will remember that you screwed up parts and you shipped subpar parts.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. Don't deliver garbage. Never deliver garbage. Like, people will be upset that, you're right. Like, people will kind of be upset when you're late, but they'll be more upset if you're on time with with garbage.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Or even shipping like stuff that's right on the edge. Like, if you're like, oh, they gave me all this tolerance, but I'm like right on the outside, just past in. Like, oh, it's only 1,000, it's only 2/10, it's only whatever. If they catch that, they won't trust you. And like, that's what you have with your customers. And like, it's so hard to rebuild trust with customers where, and yes, fully admit due dates and deadlines fall in there too. Like, if you say you're going to be done, definitely try your hardest to be done. But I'm saying that if you have to make the choice, like if it's 4:00, you have to ship by 5, and you find one of your parts has a nick in it or has a bore that's undersized or oversized, and it's the difference between shipping that day or redoing it tomorrow and then shipping that tomorrow and letting them know that, the email that says, hey, we found an escape in our final inspection, we will send this tomorrow because we're going to remake it, sounds a hell of a lot better than their email back to you of, hey, one of the 5 parts you sent us has out of tolerance feature. Yeah,
and is unusable.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are the 3 biggest pieces of advice. And again, I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm sure you're probably looking more for, mills and stuff like that. But I think the business part of it is really the hardest part of it for me, and the most learning I have to do consistently.
I think a lot of people would agree with that, really. Because truthfully, like, if that's not where you are, like, you probably should be there. That, like, thinking about the business, because that was my experience when I started a shop when I was like 20, was, oh, I can make parts, I'm going to make money, period. And it's like, oh yeah, you got to be able to like get customers and make good parts, and like that's part of it. But like, then what, like invoicing and packaging and blah blah blah, like there's so much more that goes into it than just making parts. It's such a weird thing to think about a machine shop, but it's like, being the smallest part is machining parts, but it is kind of like the thing that you should be good at anyway, so you shouldn't really focus on that, which is weird.
Yeah, because it's the relationships. Like, you're not Xometry, so you have to. My value add is my customer service. It is the fact that someone can call me, and I can walk right out there and be like, "Oh, here's where your parts are. Here's the delays. Here's the successes. I'll send you pictures if you want." that's my value add over a place like Xometry or Fictive or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Some great advice. Let's talk about your decision to go into business with a partner and how that has been. Things like your skill set, what's different, what's the same, how does the day-to-day look, which, I mean, we've talked about it on this. It's been an evolution for sure. I mean, you guys have been in business for
8 years this year.
8 years this year. Yeah. So I imagine this is also, I mean, all these questions are fucking massive questions, but that's what we're here for, baby. We want to hear you talk.
Yeah. Really, the decision to go into business was, and I've said it numerous times, this was just Brad and I being super naive and in our early 20s and saying, we can do it better than our bosses. We should start a shop. And he had some money saved up and I didn't. He was more than happy to put up capital to start the shop. And it just worked out like that. And really, we kind of just did it very part-time for years. I mean, I remember initially we had these delusions of grandeur of like, oh, well, like we'll do this for like a year and then we'll go full time and we're making like rolling in money, like, you know, kind of like what you were saying of like, oh, I'm young and dumb and I think I can just start a shop and make parts and money will rain down on me from the heavens.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that. And there was a lot of back and forth. You know, Brad initially didn't have any. He just was like happy just having a shop and like making stuff here and there and whatever. And I was the one who was pushing to be like, no, I want to make this like our jobs. Like I want to go full time here eventually. And even for me, that took years before I really felt dedicated to it. Like we were kind of in this limbo state for probably 3 years, if not more. And then I really doubled down on it when I got my last job, and it just kind of exploded from there. Really, you know, putting in a concerted effort and deciding, okay, I need to leave my job. I need to make a place that I can leave to. So as far as different skill sets, for sure, especially in the beginning, I had done very, very little stainless and anything like that. And Brad's job was all stainless. And I had done very little production, and Brad's job was all production. It's production stainless steel, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he was the one who just knew how to shut up and run a machine. And like I said it on the earlier part with Josh, that like our first customer, we just did a bunch of stamped plates that then we put tight tolerance features into.
Oh, interesting.
And he was the one who could just standing there and bolting and unbolting these plates and running them for hours and hours and hours. And that was a skill I had to learn. Like he was totally comfortable in it, and I was definitely not comfortable in it.
Yeah, you're like, can I do anything else, please?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was really tough for me to be motivated at all for that kind of stuff. And then day-to-day work, we kind of just... Right now, I do still a large majority of the quoting, and so I will just let him know, like, hey, I quoted this job. It's going to go on this machine. You're most likely going to do it, you know, unless the schedule changes. And decision making is more or less just looking over at each other at our desk and say, hey, I want to do this. What do you think? Hey, I want to do this. Oh, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
If it's like a bigger decision, I mean, we've joked, and it's still technically a real thing. Like if we're buying a machine, we typically go to Topgolf to talk about it in air quotes. I mean, we've already very much made the decision at that point, but we go and hit some balls and chat a little bit more about it and really make the final decision there. And yeah, we've done that for every machine, I think.
Nice. So there was something that you said there kind of early in your answer was about the 3-year limbo state. So what exactly did that look like for both of you guys? Really?
So when both of us had day jobs, Brad was night shift and I was day shift. And so he worked like 2 to midnight, 4 days a week. And I went through a few jobs in that time period, but 7 or 8 to 4 or 5 or something like that. And so I would go in after work if we had orders. which sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. He would come in the morning and run stuff if we had stuff for him to run. Very often I would be the one setting it up at night and then leaving for him to run. And then sometimes we would come up on a weekend, and it was kind of a limbo, because we didn't have enough customers to be there a lot. And it was kind of chicken and an egg problem. Like, we didn't have enough customers to be there a lot. So we weren't motivated to be there a lot. So we weren't pushing to get any more customers. So we didn't have any work to be there a lot. Kind of thing.
So early on, how were you getting customers, and like were people approaching you like they are now, or was it more you guys were just kind of like, who was getting more work? Would you say one of you was getting more work, or was it just kind of like, hey, I talked to this guy, he wants us to make some parts for him?
That's how it was. Yeah. Almost all of our initial customers were friends or old colleagues or people from school. We made a post on Facebook in the very beginning that we both shared that was like, hey, we started a shop. Here's some pictures of stuff we make. And we got a few jobs out of that from different people. Our first big customer was through Brad. It was a guy he had worked with that then went on to be like quality manager or something at this company. And so he knew that they were looking for someone to outsource to.
Cool. How would you say, like, 'cause I mean, 8 years is a long time to be working with somebody. How would you say that you guys have like grown together as over this time, you know? Because like you said, he was very much a production guy and you very much weren't. And so you both had to kind of learn to do other things to make the business grow into what it is today. How has that looked for you guys, and how has that been a bit of a struggle, or like, and how has it been I mean, obviously there's always these weird things with growth, but like, I'm assuming at the beginning it was more just like maybe like bickering or just kind of recognizing before you kind of got into like a flow about it?
I think for the longest time, it was just kind of us hanging out. And so it wasn't a big deal. I think the biggest places that we've grown are kind of melding of our personalities. So like Brad, when we first started hanging out and started the shop, was like super, super conservative with money and super, super avoidant of any risk. And, very that way. And I was like, let's just throw money at the wall and let's see where it sticks. And and so we've both kind of crossed over into each other's business there. Like I'm much more conservative than I used to be and really think things through a little bit more. And on the same token, like now say to Brad, like, hey, we need to buy a few grand of Lang stuff because I have this idea for this machine. He goes, yeah, whatever. Okay, sure. Do it. Whereas like years ago, I couldn't imagine not having a serious like sit down discussion about that and like weighing the odds and seeing if that was something we should do. And so we've definitely both, I think, taken from each other we saw we were missing. And it really has helped us both, I think, grow the business, not staying stuck in our ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of skills, like you guys have grown into being more complementary to each other as opposed to like growing in the same lane and being parallel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, I will fully admit that my work ethic was dog shit when we started the company. And like, I've very much turned that around, and Brad has become a much better prototype machinist and very much or less hesitant to just jump in and start programming stuff and making parts. And he's learned a lot about aluminum. Like he was as scared of aluminum as I was of stainless steel when we started, which was always so funny to me because I was like, it's butter, dude. Like just throw tools in it and it'll work, like for the most part. And he would be like, well, just go slow and it would work. Like, what are you doing? So
that is hilarious because like aluminum is one of those things where it's like you can fuck up so hard and it just works out. Like, my rapid plane was off by like 100,000, so I just full sent this end mill into the material. It was fine.
yeah, I just gave my part a buzz cut. It's okay.
Yeah, where like in stainless, that's $100. Easy.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think we've both learned a ton from each other. It's been really good over the last 8 years.
Sick.
How much we've learned.
Nice. Coming up on 10. We'll have to do another special thing for that.
For sure.
So when will we hear about the Top Golf trip for the C250?
Yes. So we had a few people ask about that. Right now, it's all about when we can move. Like, it just cannot happen in our current space unless we sold every single machine, because we have 100 amps into the suite.
She's worth
and
it.
It's like 88 probably for the Hermla or something like that.
Yeah.
So
that'd be fine.
Yeah. Who needs more machines? You just need one good machine, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
I definitely haven't had all 3 machines running all week.
No. So on that note, this isn't a question, but do you want to talk about that?
Oh, so I did. I can't remember if I did a little bit with Josh, but the place that was asking me a million questions just asked me 2 more yesterday. And then like 2 hours later, literally at the close of business, 5:30, they emailed my real estate agent and just said, oh, the cost of tenant improvements are too much, so this is not going to work out. It's like, cool. Thanks for wasting our time for months. And what was nice, I mean, I guess, is that our real estate agent was just as pissed. Like, he had me call him and he was like, I can't believe they screwed around this long and then still said no. And like, bothered me is they never even brought forward what the costs were. And
it's a cop-out answer for sure. They just didn't want it. Like that was just the easiest way, because realistically, it could have been like they didn't even give you the option to front the money,
right?
For you to be able to put in your own money, which makes it like they just didn't want you there. They got scared because of the floor or whatever, because they're idiots.
Probably, yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, they're going to crack our concrete, which I've seen happen, to be fair.
But not with a 5,000-pound brother.
No, not with a 5,000-pound brother. It was an NHX 4000, which is one of my least favorite machines I've ever ran, and it cracked the concrete.
Yeah, and those are chonky boys, though.
Yeah, that's a big boy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the brother. But I mean, the C250, maybe, but it'd probably be fine still.
And we told them we would pour a new slab for that if we needed to. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I probably would have I would have measured the concrete first, which apparently they were unwilling to do or something. But they're like, we'll just ask you 40 questions rather than just drilling into a corner of it and figuring out how deep it is.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So the process starts anew.
Yep. Yeah, I sent another property over to my real estate agent last night. It's a little farther than Brad and I wanted to drive, but it's 5,200 square feet and 500 amps of 3-phase.
Okay.
It already checks 2 of the boxes, and now we just need to see if it has AC or they're willing to put in AC.
Yeah. It's such a weird thing that people, like, in Arizona, it's like, can I put AC in this? And they're like, fuck you.
Yeah. It's like, you realize that it's not a storage locker, right? Like, people work here, and you somehow don't expect them to want anything but swamp coolers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dude. Yeah. Like, I don't know if I had ever brought this up before, but like my first summer out of college, when I was in a shop in like Deer Valley Air Park or whatever, with the swamp cooler went down. So we're just like that was the most intense. That was so miserable. It's like just 110 degrees in the shop. You're just like, this is so miserable. Like, this get a big ass fan and blow it on you. But even like a swamp cooler, like we have a swamp cooler in Utah, and it doesn't get nearly as hot as Arizona. And it's still like, I just don't ever want to be in there.
Well, it just makes it so humid. Like, it works only when you are right at like 10-15% humidity. And then when it starts going north of that, it's just muggy and gross. And don't understand it. We'll find a place. I know we will. Whether that means we end up having to save up a little more and buy a place, or I don't know. There's not even
Yeah.
that much inventory for buying places. Like I started looking at that last night because I was just so discouraged with finding a place to lease. And even then I was like, man, all of this is like either garbage or like $3 million. There's almost no in between.
Yeah. Just build a place, I guess.
I guess.
Take it to the next level, baby.
Right. Yeah. Let's add some more complexity.
Just fuck it. We're doing our own thing.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out. But yeah, that's the latest update, is that I cannot do anything with 5-axis until I have a new place. So stay tuned.
We're all waiting on bated breath for that C2. I mean, really, everyone just wants that C250 to show up and see what you do with it.
I've talked too much about it. I am pumped. My friend locally just got his C250. I think his is the first new Hermla in Tucson in a long time.
Yeah.
And he is very close to my shop. So I'm planning on going over to his place a lot and playing on his C250 and learning a bunch.
Nice. Yeah. All the Hermlas are in Phoenix.
Yeah, there's a ton.
Yeah. Well, and they're all at like one company.
Yeah. SA.
Yeah. But they're dead as fuck right now because they're semicon. So
right.
They're not making shit. It's kind of upsetting, but they have like everything. They have robo drills. I think they have Matsuras. They have all the Hermles that you can think of, like every single one of them.
Microns. They've got Brothers. They've got so many machines. It's insane.
Yeah. Which is really indicative of the ebb and flow of, semicon work. Cause they're just like, fuck it. I need a machine right now.
Yeah.
To make
I
parts.
heard, and this is secondhand, but I heard that that's why they even ended up with the Microns, is that they were like, hey, we need 2 more cells. And Hermla was like, oh, we're 6 months out. And they were like, okay, well, Micron says they have, 2 Mil S units ready to ship tomorrow. So we're buying those.
Yep. Dude, when semicon is going, it's fucking going. It's crazy. Like 2018 was gangbusters for semicon, and like it's made a lot of people's 2019s really suck.
Well, and it's coming back now with all the CHIPS bill money that's getting sent out everywhere.
Yeah, you would think it should be coming back at some point, but right now it's wicked down still. It's I know quite a few people who are impacted by it. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, just goes to show, can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. I don't know. Should we keep talking about work? Well, let's see. Actually, I am kind of curious about what was the first bike you owned and your first car?
First car was a hand-me-down 93 Camry.
Love it.
From my grandparents. And I absolutely destroyed that thing. I would go tray drifting with it. I would do a ton of e-brake turns. I would set up cones in like the middle school parking lot and just like go do e-brake turns and shit. I remember one summer I got new tires, and I want to say in like the span of 3 months over the summer, I absolutely just roasted only one set of the wheels, like only the fronts, because they were spinning so much, and the rears spent most of their time locked up. And my parents were like, what did you do? And I was like, I don't know how this happened.
Yeah. That's so funny. Dude, what?
Yeah.
And then tray drifting, dude. That's hilarious. That's like straight up Fast and Furious era shit, I swear.
Oh, 100%. And it was like, I got this piece of shit, and like I should have just been grateful. I should have been like, man, I got a reliable car. It's got a lot of life left in it. And I was like, no, let me just burn this thing to the ground if I can.
Let me get something better. Maybe if I dump this, I could get my CRX, dude.
And then my first bike was a 92 CBR 600 F2. So still carbureted. I bought it from some guy. I didn't know any better. Like, very sketchy house to buy it from. I want to say it was like $1,000. It ran. He was like, oh yeah, I had issues with the lights, so I like put them on the switch. And then like the first time I ever took it to a mechanic, he goes, oh, so you like to run from the cops? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, you got a kill switch for all your lights. And I was like, Oh, okay. This is all making sense to me now. So yeah, that was my first bike. It was fantastic. I mean, it was a pile of shit, but it was also just super fun.
That is so fucking wild, dude. Oh my God. Jeez, meth is crazy.
It is indeed.
Yeah. And then I think you've told this on the podcast before, but your worst crash story, was you broke your leg, or you were in the hospital for a while, or you like almost died or something?
So I don't know. Is he talking about motorcycle crash or is he talking about machine crash?
And that's a good question. This is also, I didn't say, it was Josh Furman from Firmworks, who I'm going to go see in a couple months.
Oh,
let's do both.
Okay. Yeah. So worst motorcycle crash. I got T-boned by a Nissan Titan 12 years ago, something like that. Like it's the only time I've ever had a piece of paper where I was cited for doing the speed limit. It was fantastic. Like it was the only time I've been in zero fault. I was going south on this road that was 2 lanes, and one lane was all backed up due to construction, and I was going down the other lane, and they had left a gap for someone to turn left across traffic. And rather than go into that first stop lane and looking again, he just gunned it and hit me. And I mean, I don't remember it all. I remember a light 3 miles beforehand. And then my next memory is waking up in the ambulance and trying to fight them off of me, and them being like, no, you've been in an accident. You need to calm down.
Yeah. It's like, we're trying to save your life right now, kid.
Yeah. So that was by far my worst one. And actually I was hit hard enough that I blacked out. So I did the noodle thing and was really not as injured as I should have been. Like I broke a bone in my foot. I had some nerve damage in one of my arm for a little while, some big, cuts and stuff like down to the bone. But besides that, I was wearing gear. I had a good helmet. Yeah. I was, you look at the bike, or like I went and saw the bike, and it was like an L shape. Like the swing arm had like folded almost not quite 90 degrees, but maybe 45 degrees off of the bike. And seeing that, I was like, oh, I really lucked out. Like I did okay.
Yeah. So he didn't directly, or did any part of the truck hit you directly?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. You don't remember that? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Damn.
And then machine crash. I don't have any like amazing machine crashes that I've done. I told the one on here, my first big crash was like running a shell mill into Jaws at like 100 inches a minute. I think that was my first crash and probably my worst.
Yeah.
To date. Knock on wood. I've seen a lot of crashes up close, like next to me, that are much worse. But for the most part, like, I've had stuff where like I forget my retract plane and snap a tool off on a bolt, or, the things that we all do, forget to set a tool. And that one was almost really bad. I was drilling a 1/2-inch hole in a part in the Speedio that was standing up like 6 inches. And it was late at night. This was like only when we had the X1, and I had forgot to set the tool. And I don't know what it was about it, but I had just enough wherewithal in me that as I saw it coming down, it was like, that doesn't look right. And I hit the stop button just as the tip of the drill was rapiding into the spot. And it made like a terrible screeching noise because of that. But like it would have, full on, it probably had 3 or 4 more inches to its retract plane before it would have done anything. So it was an almost crash, but thankfully not.
Wow. Nice. I have 3 that I can think of. Two were me directly, and one of them was just like we were troubleshooting somebody else's program, and when we got past the part that it couldn't, this was while I was working at South Bay, and we were on an H plus 630, so pretty big horizontal, doing a laydown operation on a semiconductor part, and we were working through a probing routine, and it wasn't my program, but like this was during COVID. So I was like the only programmer on site, and I was working with like the dude who ran the horizontals, and we just like couldn't get it to go past a certain point. And then we finally got it to go past, and we were like, yeah. And as we were like, yeah, just boom. And the probe just full into the part, because he meant to retract an inch, but he didn't retract an inch from where he was. He retracted an inch, and the work offset was the center of rotation. So so it pulled, like we got it to go past where it was, and then it probed like we wanted it to, and we were like sick, and then it was boom and just smashed it. Like you could see, like, and the part was unrecoverable, which sucks, because that was like a $10,000 or $15,000 part.
Oh.
It's an assembly, so like, but that is a main component, and like we tried, but like it like imprinted the like little ring. You could kind of like read the Renishaw stuff in the part itself.
No way.
It was fucking nuts. And then the two worst crashes that I personally had were both on lathes. And hey, I'm still not too scared of them, but one of them was on a Nakamura, one of them was on an Akuma, and they're fairly similar. Where no, they're close enough. I mean, it was sending the fucking turret into something. So the first one was on a Nakamura, and we're using like a dual insert boring bar, so it could cut. It had an insert on either side, and so we'd like drop down, and like we'd go below center first and face up, and then come above and like come down to like chamfer. Mm-hmm. And I had just touched it off. And at the time I was using the face of the chuck to touch off tools. And then I would put a value in the G54 to come out. And so I just touched it off, and then I didn't put the value back. So the first thing it did was it went to the face of the chuck and then straight down into the material like 100% rapid. That was pretty sick. So I started putting, like, I still do that same way. I still do that like exactly. I just put G10 lines at the beginning of every program now. So if I do forget it, the program will catch me. And that's fine. And then the second one was on an Akuma, where I crashed this machine so hard that it was better after it was fixed. And I was showing somebody like there's Akuma, like the OSP control has some like really interesting features. Like you can, on MDI, there's like a running list of the codes that you've ran. So you can kind of like scroll up and like go to a position. Like if you had been running the same things over and over again, and like kind of start up and then like run it down. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. This is one of my favorite features of this control. It's also one of the things where I found out that there's a different tool table depending on which spindle is selected for that machine. And so I had this thing set for, I was using like tool 4 to come down and be a stop for the bar loader. So I just like smash into the turret, which is cool. And then it would set that, but I didn't have the main spindle selected. I had the sub spindle selected. And so I just full sent the turret into the main spindle or the sub spindle, boom, and like knocked it like 80 thou off the center or something. But it did find a problem that we had the whole time, which is like the only way, like so what happened was, it's something that we knew we had the whole time, because like when we would grab the part on the transfer, it would always mark it. No matter what we did, it would mark it. Like not like, oh, there's witness lines, like this part is fucked up marked. And what was happening was, like, if you measured the concentricity of the spindles when they were both at home, well, the main spindle was always at home, but when the sub spindle was at home, it was dead nuts. But as it would come out, the B axis or the W axis on an Akuma was coming at an angle. So it would like move the part. And so that got worse when I crashed it. And so they fixed it. And then this problem that we had been chasing for like a month just went away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's what I said. Like, I crashed it so hard, I fixed it. But those are probably my two worst. Those are the three worst that I've seen, that I've been a part of and around. And it's the cost of doing business, baby.
Yeah, lathe stuff definitely scares me. Like, I've run a few lathes. I'm definitely by no means competent, even, I would say. I could hack my way around one, but they definitely, scare the shit out of me.
They're my favorite. Like, even after all that, I still like, I love like, especially the B-axis stuff, like NTMX or the MX100 or whatever. Like, the more turrets, the better. Like 2 spindles, 3 turrets. Like, let's go, baby. That shit's just so much fun. It's a lot of shit going on for sure. But like, when they're cranking and when you get that like process like really fucking dialed in, oof, nothing better. Nothing better.
Love it.
Yeah. Let's see. What do we got? A lot of these are basically the same, which is like, what would you do if you could do it again? What would you do if you could do it again?
All right. Yeah. So John at the shop was asking that. If I had to change career paths tomorrow, I don't know. I really don't know. Kind of deep down in this rabbit hole right now, but I really don't know. Really do love. I mentioned it, I think, even the last part. I do love like media. Like, I watch a lot of YouTube stuff about like behind YouTube and like how they film and all of that. And I think that like social media, but media creation is very interesting to me. As a kid, I was also really interested in like industrial design, like making the things that machinists hate to make. Like, oh, I've designed this super cool organic housing for this shampoo bottle. Now make the molds for it. Have fun. Bye.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure what I would do if I changed career paths. I kind of love what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing, we've kind of had this conversation a handful of times, is that we have like an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you just happen to be a fucking manufacturing nerd, So that's how you're doing what you're doing now. But like, if you were to start another business, what would that business be? If it wasn't machining, like, I could see, I mean, you bought that fucking camera,
That's a good one. That is a fair point. Like, I think no matter what I did, I would eventually make my own business out of it, just because I do love working for myself, and I like kind of owning the full stack of like, I sell the stuff, I make this stuff, or like I do all the things. And so, I think you're right there that I would do that for sure.
Yeah. Cause like, your brain isn't like, if it wasn't manufacturing, your brain is still your brain, and you'd just be like, fuck whoever I'm working for. You're like, which is rude. Cause like, I mean, we both had really good bosses. I'm positive of that, but it's also like, you just can't satisfy me like I can satisfy myself, baby.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Let's see. Oh yeah. He had also asked about 5-axis contestants. I mean, it's basically Hermle at this point. Yeah.
Like
let's not beat around the bush.
You talk about your list. Your list is one fucking machine. Let's be real.
That is not to say that I haven't spent time evaluating other stuff. Like, especially at IMTS, I went around and talked to a lot. If Micron had any reputation that wasn't just terrible service, they would be in the running, just because of sheer like financial wise. Like, their machines are very well priced.
The E series is sick.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think at IMTS they had one of those with the pallet pool for like $460 or something like that.
And that's like, and like, even on like, if you were to buy that now, it's like $500. And I think that's just one of those regional things, because my a Methods customer who I did work with, they have like 6+ Ks, or 6 or 7 Haverly plus Ks, but they also have like 15 microns, all of them palletized, and they're
Wow.
like, and they love those things mostly, like, and like the difference between the Plus K and the Micron really for them is they love the Heidenhain control, because they do a lot of bone plates and shit like that, where it's part families, and the part family thing, like the .h file, how you can have like very specific like offset tables and probe tables and blah 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 set up for every single machine, every single part in that control, makes doing shit like that really fucking easy. And they're like, can Fanuc do that? And it's like, short answer is kind of.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's like, yes, but it's complicated, you know, like that. It's not built in the way it is built in. You can build, like, the nice thing about Fanuc is, especially on a robo drill, you can build whatever the fuck you want into it, but like you also have to build whatever you want into it.
Right. Yeah. There's no framework to start. It is. It's writing a website from HTML. It's not going to Squarespace and like, hey, I want a website.
Exactly. Which is kind of what you get with Heidenhain, where like you're a little bit more like, they're not going to give you the same access to the control that you do get with Fanuc, but they also are going to give you a lot of functions that you don't, that for most, I would say like 99.9% of people, you're going to be fine. You know, unless you're fucking Hadrian, you're like, you don't need those functions, you know? But yeah, like, anyway, all that being said, yeah, it would be an interesting one to do, to like experiment with down the road once you're in 5-axis and you're like cruising, be like, yeah, we'll try this one out. Especially when you're in the position of trying to get your business, you're like, what do you got for me? Let's see what you got.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What can you do for me today?
Yeah.
For sure.
Make me happy, baby. You know what daddy likes. All right. I am kind of curious about this one from Cameron. That's Patreon.
Yep.
Yeah. Cameron from the Patreon asked, how competitive is the business, and is it hard to manage multiple contracts at once while machining? And it's hard to, I would imagine, and I'm answering your question for you, but it's like, it's hard. I imagine it's hard to like judge how competitive it is.
Yeah.
'Cause you're busy.
We're super busy, and I don't know, like a lot of my friends, I think could be my main competition. You know, like Easton and I swim in very similar waters sometimes, but we both are very specialized in what we do also, you know, and I think that
he's got
again, yeah, exactly. And like, I think that this year really has emphasized that, where like we are trying to be a specific shop to only attack specific needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it was in Pumpkin Patch or Pumpkin Plan where he says, what is it? Don't be the best. It's like, don't be the best, be different. Like be in your own league.
Yeah. Yes. And yeah, 100%. Being niche is where it's at for the most part. I mean, there's always like, there's a big conversation around growth strategy that way, but ultimately like it makes so much more sense to just like hit the one thing. Like we're like, for me, we're slowing way the fuck down on automation and just focusing on like cutting, because that's like what we're really good at. But for you, it's like, it doesn't make sense for you to go out and try and get like high volume work. You're not really set up for it. And it just like murders your margins, and is going to take like an entire spindle offline for like what, 5 or 10% margin. Like,
yeah,
what
exactly.
Like, and it's like, you're not like, it's like more consistent work, but it's like, it's longer work. That's long. That's like, I like long money versus like short money of what you're doing now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting to the point where like, if a job takes me more than 2 or 3 days, I'm getting itchy. I'm like, okay, this is taking up too much of my machine time on this machine. I need to get this out here. Like,
yeah. So I would kind of be curious. I like kind of going back to the earlier one. I wonder how Brad would answer this question. You know?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, well, he's definitely gonna have to come back on and answer some of this stuff. But
yeah,
as far as how competitive it is, I don't really know, and it's not like it's not like I'm ever hearing like, oh, well, we're placing the order with this person instead.
Yeah.
You know,
you
so-
either get the work or you don't get the work, you know?
Yeah.
And why the work wasn't, why you don't get the work could be that they actually didn't need the parts at all, or they just found somebody who was way cheaper or whatever.
Right. Which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, I've quoted it where I need to be.
Yeah. I've thought about competition a lot, and like, I feel like there's realistically, like with the state of the industry, I think we're more all it's a weird thing to say, but like we're all more partners than we are competitors, because there's more work than there are shops, you know? Like there's always, nobody's like, oh, I'm good, you know? Like I don't need anything made ever. Like there's a dearth of shops, or like not like an abundance of shops that I can just send all my stuff to. It's just like not really where the industry is at. So
Yeah.
it would probably be worse if you were getting nothing, but you're so busy that's like, who cares?
Yeah. And I find that if I can partner with other shops that are
Like
similar to me, but other niches,
yeah,
they in turn will send me the work that's right for me. Like it's not like I get a ton of referral work, but when I do, it's because it's somebody that I've already dealt with, that I send work their way because it's outside of our niche. And they're like, hey, this is a Protium part. Like I look at this and I think, you guys, can you take care of this? And it's like, sure.
Which that's the place to be, right? Not like, oh, I need a machine shop for this. It's, I need Protium for this. And that's
exactly.
And that's fucking hot.
Oh,
we love that.
Amazing. I think that kind of goes back to my answer for like, will I launch my own product? And it's like, that's not a Protium thing. Like I have very much crystallized, I think, what Protium means, at least for the short term, and like makes it so easy to say no to stuff. Like you look at stuff and you're like,
yeah, dude,
that's just not me. Like it just not me today. I'm sorry. Or it's not my company. Like, sorry.
Yep. That was an experience I had like this week, actually, or was it this week? Yeah, this week, where guys had his machine hasn't been running for like 2 years, you know? And it's like $1 million piece of equipment that he bought brand new, hasn't made a single part in 2 years.
That makes me shudder.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like, it's pretty like clear to me. He doesn't know how to run it and stuff. And he's like, I need help. And you're like, okay. And like you break it down, and this is like why I break it down visually. It's like the programming side of it is like a third of what the actual cost is for us to do the work. And like half of it is just us being on site, getting it running. And then you like shoot that off, and it's like, this seems like a lot of money. I'm sure it's like this is what this costs to do business with us. And it's like, I don't know if he's actually going to say yes to this. And he didn't say yes to this. And he's like, oh no, I actually know how to run the machine and set it up. I just need help with programming. And that's like a red flag for me. Cause it's like, if I could program and I had Hypermill or Mastercam, he has both. And this machine, and my $1 million piece of equipment that I know how to run and set up was just sitting there, I can't connect those dots, you know?
Yeah. There's a lie in there somewhere, but where's the lie?
And so it's like, oh, I only need help with one thing. And it's like, and I came back to him and was like, we'll program for you if that's what you want. This is the price, but I need to go to your shop for at least one day to understand what I'm working with here, and to make sure that on your end you're set up, you know? And like, that's because knowing that he probably doesn't know how to use this piece of equipment, me just entering into, because we've done this before and this is how I know, where it's like, we're fine, we're good, like just send us. And it's like, I know you get like zero feedback. It's like, well, you programmed with all these tools we don't have. And it's like, okay, so you could have said, like, that's why I asked you for a tool library. You said you didn't. You said it's fine. We have whatever you need. And it's like, oh, we just stop. Like when it comes to the programming side of things, it's like, if you don't have a program, like a tool library, if you don't have a fixture library, and I can't come to your site to like make sure that on your end we have this, like, then this isn't a good fit for us. Cause like, you're just going to be upset You're going to spend a lot of money and be fucking pissed. And I'm never going to hear from you again. And you're never going to tell me why. But I know why. I already know why.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just, it's just finding those things.
I wonder if you should sell that as something different then, like sell it as a add-on. Like say we can program for you without tool holders, without collision avoidance, without any of this, or you can buy our assets package. And like the assets package is just paying for you to go and make assets pretty much. But then like they see assets and they're like, "Oh, I get something out of this."
Yeah. It's kind of why I've been really hammering the whole like solution thing, instead of just like, oh, we program stuff, we make stuff, whatever. It's like we provide. I mean, our tagline right now is like manufacturing the perfect solution. I think like we're going to mess with that a little bit, but like everything we do is trying to provide solution. Like if it's a fixture, that's a solution. If it's training, that's a solution. If it's a project, that's a solution. Not like, oh, we're programming parts, because like it gets so nebulous so fast that it's just not worth it. Like there's just some times where like money doesn't matter, it's like
right.
I'd rather not do this than enter into something that is going to make everybody upset.
Yeah, exactly. You're experienced now where yes, this is what you're buying, but you're not seeing all of our back and forths that's going to happen once I deliver, and you're not happy with it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Do we have Garrett Wade asked, and I'm curious too, because I've seen it sitting in the same fucking spot the last couple times that I've visited you. What is going on with the MR2?
It has just been sitting. I think it will have been a year in September that it's been sitting. So I think I told it on here. It was stolen last September.
Yeah.
I got it back a month and a half later, or a month later, something like that. And really just haven't had the heart to work on it. And then recently I was like, oh, I want to just start working on it. And then it's 115. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. So maybe when we move, actually not maybe. When we move, I will very likely bring it inside wherever we move to. And I think having it inside will encourage me to at least get it back up and running and get it, the body panel undented that was dented by it, and make sure that there's nothing else broken that they didn't find in the insurance adjustment. So we'll see.
Question then on that note, because you're talking about getting quite a bit of space and possibly, bringing the MR2 inside and whatever, like, would you get a lift?
We've talked about it.
Yeah.
I will say that. Yeah. Well, because you've seen the mechanic next to us. He now has a real 2-post lift, but in his original bay, he has one of those mobile lifts that you can kind of push out of the way and stuff. And they're not terribly expensive.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't, you could push it up against the wall when we're not using it, but then still have something to lift our cars. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
So very likely we'll end up with something like that, I think.
You get those long run times.
Exactly.
And you guys have all your tools set up and you're all programmed and like ready to go. And it's like, well, I guess we'll just go fucking turn some wrenches, baby.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It would make it so easy for me to at least start on the engine swap if I had a lift and my car was inside. I could go loosen everything and then come in on a Saturday and drop the motor and transmission. It's like, cool, done.
Yeah. I can't believe you're not even thinking about putting it inside now. You have that whole open space, all that open space right by the door.
Yeah, the open space filled with tool grinders and the Freddy and my chop saw. And
don't forget about your new barrel.
Yes, my new water barrel. Wonderful. Yeah. Can't drain my AC into the parking lot because I'm going to ruin the pavement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super fun. Can't wait to move.
Yeah. Oh, brother. So coming to the end, nice, quick, breezy. How did you get started into machining from Tuck's Garage?
I got started into machining because I was a failed engineering student, is the short answer of it. I was 18, stupid, going to college for mechanical engineering, not really going into class, skipping class a whole bunch, and dropped my GPA to the point where the engineering college said, hey, you can't be here anymore. You need to go raise your GPA at Pima Community College and then come back. And I went there and saw machining. I needed an elective just to fill time, saw machining. Again, like my whole backstory is just full of me being so naive. They had it in the thing. It's like Mac 100. And then there's something like, oh, you can take a test, and if you pass the test, you can skip Mac 100 and go to Mac 105, which is like the next step. And I just looked at the test. They had it online. And like the first thing was like, how do you read a micrometer? Like, what is this micrometer reading? What is this? And I was like, oh, I don't know any of this. I guess I'm taking Mac 100.
Yeah.
And just fell in love. Like I was like, oh, this is super cool. I'm going to stay and get my manual machining certificate, and I can use it to make money while I go back to engineering school. And I was like, oh, there's this thing called CNC. Well, I'll get my CNC certificate after a year and go back to school and earn money that way. And then I was already in it, and I was like, well, I'm going to finish this out. Obviously, I'm going to get my associates. And so I did. I found a job while I was there at a shop locally, started programming parts after a couple semesters of Mastercam class, and yeah, haven't looked back.
Bob's your uncle, baby.
Yep.
I think you're fine. I go back and forth on that a lot about the whole engineering school thing. Cause I mean, I have like 2 engineering degrees or whatever, but like, I don't really use them ever. Like, you know, I think the only thing that it does is it teaches you how to think.
Yeah.
Like it just gives you like a structure for solving problems, which is obviously helpful.
I would go back just to be a completionist and be like, I started something, I really want to finish it out. And I do eventually want to finish it out. That is not a near-term goal at all.
Yeah. It's kind of funny to like think about doing something like you'd essentially be doing it just to do it, you know, like
100%.
Like fuck it. Cause I said I would. Nice. Favorite ice cream flavor?
I like mint chocolate chip stuff. So I'm big on that.
Okay.
Any kind of mint or chocolate. Oh, and then also Fish Food by Ben & Jerry's. I love. It's like chocolate and marshmallow and dark chocolate chunks. I like that a lot.
There was this fucking like boutique ice cream shop that might have got taken out by COVID called Big Gay Ice Cream out of like New York. And they had some fucking killer flavors. If you can ever, actually, I'm going to look that up. Big Gay Ice Cream. No, they're still around. Dude, they have some like absurdly good flavors though, but they're in the Northeast.
All right. I'll have to next time I make the trek out to the Northeast.
Yeah, the pilgrimage.
I will look for them.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end. What's been popping up in your browser, buddy?
Man, lots of more real estate research, trying to figure out what the hell is going on and where we might be able to move. Maybe. Trying to think of what else. Oh, have you seen the ads for the Van Gogh experience?
No.
They keep popping up on. So they do this like immersive Van Gogh thing that I guess has been traveling the country, and they've got like a few rooms with like prints of his thing and a bunch of his story behind it. And then a few of the rooms have 3D sculptures that then they reproject his paintings on. So like they'll have like a vase and some of the flowers, and then it'll project multiple different versions of his flowers and vases because he's painted like 30 of them of different flowers and stuff. And then there's an entire room that every single wall and the floor has a projector pointing at it. And they have like a moving version of a lot of his most famous paintings that like morph from one to the other. So it's like a starry night, and then like starry night over the whatever river it is, blanking on what it is. And then it goes through like his self-portraits and whatever. And yeah, my wife and I went to that last weekend because I found some tickets, and it was pretty cool. It was, sick, dude. It wasn't super expensive, and it was a fun date and
nice,
neat to see for sure.
That's fucking rad. That's so cool.
What about you?
What have I been? I mean, I just Googled Big A ice cream to make sure that they're still in business. So I did that.
I don't think I can beat that.
Yeah. What have I been researching? I've just been kind of like cranking away at this turnkey, you know. That's mostly all I've been working on. How to, like, are hobbit feet desirable to sell pictures of, stuff like that. How to, no, but yeah, just like, I'm probably, I think I sent a picture of my van to you and Alex.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to start working on that, especially like being like a little cash strapped. Like I have a bed in the back of that thing. Maybe I'll just start driving that fucking thing around and
already drive like a maniac. So
yeah,
it kind of makes sense for a lot
like
of your stuff.
Why I bought it. And then it just kind of sat for a little bit, or sat for like 3 years. Like it has no dash in it right now. But like it runs, it drives. It's a fucking like 6.2 Detroit diesel. It's a dog. Like it's an absolute fucking dog, but it gets like 20 miles to the gallon for that big ass van.
Whoa, that's really good.
Yeah, it's awesome. So it'll get me places. That's, and like just like looking at things for that kind of like cheap things that I can do to get that thing, because it's like a fishbowl right now, to make it not a fishbowl, but also not like this thing looks like somebody's cooking meth in the back of it, because it's not the most appealing looking van, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely has that feel of potential seedy underworld.
Yeah,
depending on who owns it.
Yeah, and depending on like how I'm dressed, I look like a real jackwagon, And then, I guess little drop for, I have been, a lot of change management stuff and kind of like plugging the next book that we're going to do.
Yes. So the next book club book, it's going to be Chris, Alex, and me all talking about it. And what is it called again?
Leading Change
by
John Cotter.
There you go.
It's a quick one. It's like a 5 or 6 hour audiobook. Fucking Alex Kern is going to read it, and I guess you are too, you maniacs. I've already read it.
I'm listening to it. Okay, I'm like an hour into it.
Yeah, I read it like twice already.
Yeah, we're the maniacs. Okay, so just a little behind the curtain here. Chris, Alex, and I are on a group chat, and we decide on this book. And then literally maybe like 28 hours later, Chris goes, all right, I'm done. When are you guys going to be done? And I was like, you nutcase. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I don't take notes, so I just read it a lot, and then you take notes, and then I remember what to say based on how the conversation flows.
Yeah. So far, it's pretty good, though. It's not at all what I thought it was going to be. Like you said, change management. And so I thought it was going to be like, here's how to commit processes to paper and blah, blah, blah.
That is more ADKAR. The other, like ADKAR, ADKAR, which is like knowledge, desire, awareness, desire, knowledge, blah, 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 something else. I don't remember it. Is more of a framework where there's like workbooks and like all these like different levels to it, and you can go to like seminars. This is more of like, I would say, the psychology and like more of the why behind change management than the whole oh yeah, this is how you do this type of thing, which I think makes it more, it's a very good way to digest and get introduced to the concept of change management, which is something that we've all realistically, we've all know is very necessary to like every business. But
right.
Like, and it gives you like terminology and a way of thinking about these things happening.
Yeah. I guess is that more people listening have been a part of a bad change implementation
100%.
or one that is incomplete or fails than ones who have gone through it successfully. Because like I'm listening to this and the examples he gives, I'm like, oh, man, I've lived that. Like that sucked.
Dude, there's more. Dude, there's there's like the one early on that really stuck out to me is the CEO that has all these little conversations and then goes away and makes a decision on his own. And that's like almost every boss I've ever had, which is super annoying. And then an example later on is the guy who like, oh, we need to number one goal is like speed of getting jobs done for the customer, whatever. But they take forever to approve change orders, to approve finances, to approve whatever, and their actions not meeting what their desires are in that hypocrisy. But yeah, it's a lot of like, yes, I feel this so deep in my heart.
Yeah. It's much less dry than it sounds. If you're listening to this and you're like, change management sounds like an absolute snooze fest. That is how I felt too. And then I started listening and I was like, oh, this is actually, not at all what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yes. Thank God.
Yeah. I was like, because the ADCAR stuff I think sounds important, but it did sound like it was like, oh, if I thought principles was dry, then ADCAR is I'm going to be a desert by the end of this.
Yeah, especially because like you have to buy. There's no audiobook for ADCAR stuff. It's you're reading that book, and it is a snooze fest for sure. So,
all right. Well, pick up the book. We will read it and get back with you guys at some point here in the next month or so.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. First of all, thank you, Chris, and thanks to Josh earlier. Please go check out their stuff. Chris, where can they find you online?
Where can they find me?
Yeah,
Shoot.
You.
Dude, I have 3 Instagrams now. I got Zap, like 2 of them are pretty much just placeholders, and we're gonna start putting stuff there. So like Zapworks with an E, ZAPWERKS for fixture stuff, Skill Gap Inc. for training stuff, and then Zap.consulting for everything else. That's the main one though. You can
awesome.
I have conversations with people on all of them. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, so go check out Zap if you guys want some training. He is the one that I'm going to lean on when I start hiring people. So please do that. Go check out Precision Microcast with Josh and Adam. Go check out NH Micro. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for 200 episodes and being such a great community. And here's to another 200.
Another 200 more, baby.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'll be back next week.